Welcome to the Flower Empowered. In today's video, we are going to do a little bit of work where we start to connect the deep abdominal muscles to the pelvic floor. So in all of the previous videos where we worked on pelvic floor strength or control or endurance, we were very much focusing on working the pelvic floor without adding any of the other muscle groups. We also went through a sequence of different functional exercises for the pelvic floor. And in this series, we're going to start to look a little bit at activating our pelvic floor while focusing on another muscle group. Now, we're going to start from the very beginning. So we start from a very, very gentle activation. So when you think core, you might think crunch, and we're not going to do crunches. We're going to first look at activating the deep muscles, and then we're going to do that activation in a couple of different positions. So standing, sitting, and walking. But first I'm going to do a little demonstration so that you can see the difference between a gentle activation and a more deep activation. So if we were to do a really big contraction, then we would be getting all of the external abdominals, so our six-pack rectus abdominis muscles to contract, and that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is reach in to the deeper layers of muscle. So I'm just going to take my bottoms down just a little. And what I want you to do is find your hip bones, so your ASIS joints, two little bony protrusions here and here. And when you find those two little bones, you can walk your fingers in just a couple of centimeters and feel the little soft spot there. Now, it should be very, very gently activated if you're standing, but if you have a weak core, then you won't feel any tension on the muscle here at all. So just notice what you feel when you put your fingers in. And what we're going to do, first we start with the relaxation of the core, so just let your belly hang out, and then you're going to just gently bring the stomach in. Now you can see it's a very, very subtle difference. So relaxed and contracted. So I can feel a very gentle activation. I'm very gently pulling my abdominals in, and at the same time I'm actually just very gently activating my pelvic floor. So it's very subtle. Now if I were to do a big contraction, you can see that everything is contracting, everything's holding in, and this isn't what you want to do. You don't want this extreme, it doesn't want to be using the rectus. You want to allow everything to relax and just subtly activate. So a very subtle, gentle pulling upwards of the pelvic floor and pulling in of the abdominals. You can do this with your breath. So if you want to inhale as you relax, and then as you exhale, drawing very gently in and very gently up. So it's just feeling that you want to try to get the two of them working together. You don't have to do it with your breath, but it's a very good way to start. So we're going to go into a seated position. We're going to do the same thing standing, but I want you just to remember that you're not trying to activate the whole core. You're just literally trying to feel deep inside. You just want to feel a very gentle activation down here in the pit of your stomach, literally. You'll feel it here as well, but you don't want to be contracting everything. If you're crunching everything in, when we contract, bring the hips and the rib cage closer to each other by contracting the rectus abdominis, that is like a crunch, and that's not the activation you're going for. You're going for a drawing in, a subtle deep drawing in, as though, imagine you have a corset that goes underneath everything, your muscles, your transverse abdominis that comes deep on the inside and runs across a little bit across here, and then you have your connective tissue, and when you activate, you should feel it down here, and you should feel a little lift in your pelvic floor. Okay, so we're going to start with seated, then we're going to come to standing, and then we're going to walk. When you take a seat to do these exercises, make sure that you sit squarely on your sitting bones with the neutral pelvis, and that you have a nice tall spine. You don't want to be rounding or collapsing here. You want to be sitting nice and straight. And then you want to find your ASIS joints, so your hips. Find those two little bony protrusions and walk your fingers in just a couple of centimeters and feel that little space where you have the deep abdominal muscles. You want to just feel a very gentle activation here along with your pelvic floor. So as you're inhaling, you're relaxing your stomach, you're letting everything hang out a little. And as you exhale, you're going to gently draw the lower abs in and lift up on the pelvic floor. So inhaling, relax everything just a little, and exhaling, drawing things inwards and upwards. And remember, it's very gentle. So subtle, exhale as you lift everything upwards and inwards, and inhale as you let everything relax. And you can do this maybe 10 or 15 times sitting comfortably in a chair. It's very good for you to get used to doing this sitting down before you take it to standing or walking. But we will go through doing this in a standing position and doing it when you walk. So starting, find your ASIS joints, just walk your fingers in a couple of centimeters, and you're just going to press on this, and then we're going to inhale, relax everything. And as you exhale, draw the pelvic floor upwards and inwards gently, and draw the abs in gently. So underneath, imagine that you're connecting everything underneath and just pulling in gently. It's not strong, it's subtle, very gentle. And then inhale, relax. Exhale, contract. Inhale, relax. Exhale, contract. Inhale, relax. Exhale, contract. So it's very, very subtle. So you're going to do that a few times. You could do that 10 times and just feel the subtle activation as you're standing. You'll notice that it feels a little different to when you're sitting, because your pelvic floor and a lot of the other muscles that support your hips are a little bit less active when you're sitting down than when you're standing up. So just notice the subtle differences between sitting and standing. So now we're going to try to do the same thing, only with some movement. So this is more on the functional side of things. So we've worked a little to try and get a very gentle activation of the core in coordination with a very gentle activation of the pelvic floor. And now we're going to do that, but while taking a few steps. So we're going to start on the side of the mat, and just first, find a good standing position. So your feet are standing underneath your legs, you're nice and tall in your spine, and just feel that gentle activation. So we feel the activation before we start. So as we inhale, we relax the belly. As we exhale, we feel the drawing upwards and inwards of the pelvic floor and the gentle activation of the core. And we're just going to walk, and we're breathing, and we're turning, and we're keeping that nice activation. So we're holding it now. We're not going to let go. We're going to keep the gentle activation of the core, keep the gentle activation of the pelvic floor, and just walk up and down, just feeling that it's very subtle. It's not a hard contraction. It's something that you can just get used to doing. And we walk. And you can do this not just up and down on your mat, but you can also do this when you're going out for a walk. Just think very subtle, very gentle activation of the abs, very gentle, subtle activation of the pelvic floor, and just try to see if you can keep that gentle, subtle activation as you're moving about, or if you're doing the dishes, or if you're cleaning up. Just as you're moving, try to see if you can get that nice activation. Now you can feel the activation as you exhale and relax a bit as you inhale. And slowly over time, you will build the endurance for that to tonically just happen by itself. So you don't actually have to think, oh, now I need to contract and hold everything. But if you're starting from ground zero and you have no strength in your core, then it's very, very important that you get this deep activation before you start to try to do any of the work with the bigger muscles, because you do have big, strong muscles in your core, your rectus abdominis, your external six-pack. That is a big, strong group of muscles, but it isn't necessarily going to give you control with your pelvic floor, because your pelvic floor works more with the deeper muscles in your core. So it's very, very important that you work on getting this very gentle activation and this very gentle connection between those two muscle groups, and get them to start working a little bit in synergy. And remember, we've already talked about the diaphragm. We've already talked about that relationship and the feeling of that relationship working together. So don't forget your hypopressives, and then these little gentle activations. Next week, we're going to do another video where we go start to look a little bit at the more external muscles, and we start to work a little bit more with building strength in the external core muscles. So if you liked this video, please feel free to like, share or comment. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe, and remember to talk about pelvic floor dysfunction. If we talk about these things, they don't become as much of an issue. We help to break the silence around pelvic floor dysfunction. Together, we can and will make a difference.